Okay, so on February 18th, 1997, a judge sentenced me to 60 to 90 days in a substance abuse treatment facility. I had been on probation for the past 2 years for driving while my license was suspended. While on probation, I got arrested for theft, for driving under the influence of alcohol, and I came out positive for cocaine on 3 urine tests. I was placed on a waiting list. I spent 20 days in the county jail before I was sent to the RIGHT program, a drug program in Corpus Christi. The painful part of this experience happened after about 30 days in the program. So I was 20 days in jail, 30 days in the program. Up to this point, I had done my best to portray a solid, well-adjusted, mature adult. I admitted that I had a small problem controlling my drinking, but I didn't really need help. Unlike most of the people in the program. This was not my first time being locked up. I had been in jail for up to 30 days and had spent 2 years in a drug treatment home. So while the others were scared and worried, I was calm, controlled, and in a weird way, I was almost at home. At night, many of the inmates cried for their wives or girlfriends, for their kids, and for their freedom. I, on the other hand, had no wife or kids. I hated my girlfriend. And I couldn't think of anything on the outside worth going back to. I was not sad or happy, scared or assured, or worried or at peace. I was numb. One day after our physical exercises and meditation rituals, one of the counselors announced that instead of our usual class, we were going to watch 2 movies. I poured myself a cup of coffee as the lights dimmed. I pulled out my notebook. There was always some sort of quiz or group discussion afterwards. So I sat down with my hot, perfectly sweetened coffee, my notebook, my pen in hand. And as the counselor pushed play on the video cassette recorder, she said, "I'm going to go ahead and show you both movies. I hope it's not too much for you." I should have taken it as a warning. Looking back, I can remember the warmth of the coffee and the comfort that I always felt in the darkness. I was totally unprepared for the emotional ride I was about to experience. The first movie was called Soft is the Heart of a Child. In my notebook, the title of the film is As Far as I Got as far as notes are concerned. The film took place in the late 70s or early 80s. As a matter of fact, the kids in the film are probably around my age by now. The movie was very simple, without sensationalism or complicated plot. It was a very realistic film about a family whose head of the house was an alcoholic. The father is a hardworking man who seems to be generally a nice guy, but when it comes to his drinking, he's very manipulative, irresponsible, and very unpredictable. The mother also works hard at her job and at home. Most of her energy goes though to making up excuses for her husband. The oldest son is around 12 years old. He's an overachiever who has vowed to never be anything like his father. His younger brother is a troublemaker. It is through him that the fact that there is a problem at home is made obvious to the outsiders. The youngest child is very isolated. Her best friends are her dolls. She also seems to live in a fantasy world. At school, when she is asked about her home life, she talks about a very happy family that goes on outings and spends a lot of quality time together. As I watched the images on the TV screen, they became the memories of my own childhood. I saw my mother coming home tired from work to a messy house. I remembered her staying up late waiting for my father to stumble through the door. I also remembered the sound of anger and desperation in her sobs. Yet in public and in front of us kids, only a fake smile could be seen on her face. And only excuses and sometimes outright lies were spoken by her. She tried so hard to make our family appear happy that sometimes I almost believed her. My older sister was an honor student. She excelled in band, became very active in church. My sister seemed to bring a sense of value and pride to our home. Looking at my sister and my mother, I can understand why it was so easy for me to pretend that there was never a problem in our home and that my childhood was filled with happiness and joy. In the younger kids in the film, I saw myself. I was often in trouble despite a potential that many saw. I seemed to carry the shame and the pain of the family on my shoulders. One could say that I was the outlet. As I watched the little girl in the film, I remember trying to sound proud of the fact that my father was in prison, as if it was a cool thing. In the film, a school counselor exposes the problem after she talks to the troublemaker. The mother and the other children, after failed attempts at covering up and minimizing the problem, finally admit that the father's an alcoholic. After they refuse to continue covering up, the father finally gets help. When the first film was over, I was in a state of shock. These memories had been buried so long that I couldn't believe they were true. And the second film, called Reflections of the Heart of a Child, was nearly identical to the first. It was just as old and the plot was the same, except for the fact that there was a narrator remembering her own experience in an alcoholic family. This film brought me to the present, but now I could see how my childhood had drastically affected my adult life. When the movies were over and the dreaded lights were turned back on, I felt naked, scared, ashamed, and in a weird way, relieved. I felt everything but numb. Somehow, I had managed to hide it all. Then I went to lunch after the films, as if nothing had happened. After lunch, we separated into groups to discuss the film. I looked at my notes and saw that I had only written the title of the first film. As the discussion began, I tried to stick to the facts of the movie. But again, I confused the scenes of the movie with the memories of my own past. This time, there were added memories. I saw my father on the ground in the backyard, handcuffed. A police officer had his foot on my father's back. I remember telling my father about my week at school. I was speaking into a phone, even though he was a couple of feet in front of me, with a thick glass between us. I remember telling my mother that my daddy was my hero when I was 5 years old. I remember the shock in her face. Don't ever say that again. As the group continued in the discussion, I felt a familiar lump in my throat. Usually I would swallow that lump and stuff it in a secret place deep inside me. This time I couldn't find that secret place. I felt naked and exposed. There were no more secrets, no more lies, no more excuses. When the counselor finally turned to me for feedback, I tried to answer as the mature, controlled adult. Instead, the confused, ashamed child within me cried out. I literally cried. For the first time in years, I cried. I was unable to speak. I was unable to reason. The sobbing turned into screaming. And I felt totally out of control. I thought I'd never stop crying, and for almost 3 hours, I didn't. That night, lying on my bunk, I closed my eyes as we said the nightly prayer. And when all said amen and the lights went out, I found myself more alone than I'd ever been in my life. I got off the bunk onto the cold cement floor and I got on my knees. I had no words, but the images in my head spoke volumes. I remember the times when I slept in alleys or in ditches, too ashamed to go home, and times when I cursed God to take my own life. I knew that I didn't deserve forgiveness, so I couldn't even ask for it. The more I thought about the events in my life, the more I saw pain, so much pain. Pain I had endured, pain I had caused, pain I had seen in others. I thought I had become immune, but on my knees on that cold floor, I knew that I hadn't. Silent tears fell on my bed and pillow. Pictures and scenes flooded my mind and my heart, and I asked myself, why am I still alive? How could I have been through all the things that I've been through and not died or gone insane? The answer came from deep within my spirit. Despite myself, God had never left me. When I understood that, at that instant, my chains broke. The mental chains that had me believing that I didn't need God broke. The emotional chains that felt only pain and anger broke. The spiritual chains that separated me from God's presence shattered. And my tears became my cure, and the pain became my strength.